The makers of Resident Evil have created some of the most iconic games in existence, which changed the entire industry multiple times. But for over a decade, they have also proven themselves to be masters of trolling their audience on the internet. What began as one of the biggest surprises in the series' history eventually became a marketing technique that somehow didn't run out of steam in the years that followed. Which is why I decided to make a small, let's call it retrospective, that takes a look back at how Capcom uses the element of surprise by subverting expectations when it comes to hyping up their own projects. For that, we have to go a little back further. Back in 2005, RE4 popularized the modern third-person shooter as one of the most influential games of all time. So a follow-up would naturally come with sky-high expectations. But they managed to pull it off by introducing a campaign built around co-op play, where you tackled those biomutants with a partner. RE5 exploded and became the back then most successful entry in the franchise ever. However, leaving its horror roots behind was controversial among old school fans. That sentiment culminated with RE6, which doubles down on big multiplayer spectacle. Despite a poor critical reception, RE6 still sold millions. So at that point, nobody expected the series to return to low-key horror. Capcom even proclaimed that the spin-off series called Revelations would be geared towards those old audiences, not the mainline games. This led to maybe the biggest shock in the franchise's history, when during a PlayStation conference, RE7 was announced as a smaller scaled project, fully focused on intense first-person horror. The gameplay footage shown in 2016 looked more like the infamous, cancelled Silent Hill game from Hideo Kojima. And Capcom knew that the surprise would be huge, which is why there were no signs of the game's title until the absolute last second. No one saw that RE7 logo coming. Actually, in hindsight, the decision to scale the series back down made sense, because despite selling a lot, the spectacle of RE6 also cost a lot to make. Funnily enough, RE7 had already been shown before its reveal as a VR tech demo called Kitchen, and seemingly had nothing to do with Resident Evil. They knew that they had to build up the surprise. You had to be there, but as a long-time fan since the 90s, who didn't really appreciate the series' action-heavy approach, this was one of the craziest moments in its history. Shortly before, in 2015, Capcom re-released a remake of the first Resident Evil game in HD to a lot of positive feedback. However, this made many fans ask the natural question: where's Resident Evil 2? The franchise producers then announced the RE2 remake, almost like they were pitching it to their own bosses. They presented their development like some sort of crowdfunding or indie title, which of course it wasn't, proudly releasing a video announcing the start of the development, but without giving any further details whatsoever. After that, the project went radio silent for years before popping up out of nowhere at another Sony conference. But the game wasn't just an ordinary remake. It was a whole reinvention of the old survival horror formula and basically was a whole new game. The reveal wasn't as drastic as RE7, but they still knew it was a big surprise and therefore played coy during the reveal trailer. First showing an ominous scene from the cryptic perspective of an animal, before eventually revealing main character Leon S. Kennedy, which made it clear what the title was and that the remake would far exceed the pre-rendered original. I won't lie, back then I kinda assumed what they were doing and that this was probably the POV of an umbrella rat, but even then the scope was still unexpected. After becoming a big success, a remake of RE3 wasn't really surprising, but they still managed to mislead people with its first presentation. The first trailer showed a first-person sequence, something that never existed in the original title, making it all the more surprising, once again, when the perspective was revealed to come from the old protagonist Jill Valentine. RE8, aka Village, tried to pull the same trick as RE7, saving the title reveal for the very last seconds, after showing scenes which didn't quite seem to fit into your typical RE game, not counting a small glimpse of the Umbrella logo. At this point though, that whole gimmick of playing tricks on viewers seemed to wear thin. All the contents of the trailer were leaked beforehand and the fairy tale aesthetics were heavily rumored, so at least to me it wasn't that mind-blowing. Then with the RE4 remake, they seem to have given up on this approach altogether. There were strong leaks that claimed that this was in production for a couple of years already. So during a Sony stream, the game kicked the door down by dropping its title right in your face. So this entire thing of leading players on a false hunch during live streams seemed to be over. But then they actually did it again, going one step further with Resident Evil Requiem. The game was rumored to appear at the 2025 Summer Game Fest, which they were surely aware of. So at first, Capcom barely gave a development update on RE9, claiming it would still take a blink of an eye for the final reveal, before leaving the stage. Which led the internet to believe that this was all there is to it. And you've got to give it to the host Jeff Keighley. He kept his act up, and this sort of thing very much felt in line with prior announcements at his shows, which are often smaller teasers. Only to return at the end with yet another ominous trailer, which could have been any other generic cinematic game at first glance. Before becoming a little weird and then, of course, revealing itself as Resident Evil 9. Frankly, the first teaser for the game wasn't that great of a trailer. It didn't really reveal much, but thanks to this trolling, it still felt memorable. In a developer interview afterwards, they shortly teased the name of Leon, which initiated a whole bunch of speculation and rumor making about the character's comeback. That might have been their plan, but eventually those rumors included a fake screen of Leon with an eyepatch. But they kinda embraced that too, and the developers later poked fun at these fakes when the real Leon was unveiled. Anyway, that was my rambling on Resident Evil trailers, I guess. I'm not sure anyone else would find this particular topic interesting, but if you did, why not leave a comment and recommend the video. Thanks for watching.